So a lot of you out there love foldable phones. In fact, I was a huge fan of the Microsoft Surface Duo, and that's why I was so excited to get a different foldable phone with a nice passport-shaped size, because I love this Google Pixel Fold. It is a unique form factor. I wanted to make this video, even if it's a little bit later than its release. I still wanted to give you a full review of the Google Pixel Fold and let you know what I think about it, because I've got to be honest, I am really, really impressed. So with all that being said, let's get right into it, and let's talk about the Google Pixel Fold. So when we look at all the competition out there, we have the Z Fold 5, and the Z Fold 5 is, in my opinion, way too tall. And when you open it up, a lot of people think, they might still think it's too tall because you might want that wider form factor. But now we have the Google Pixel Fold, and I love what they did, because what they did is they took a very boxy shape to their display. It's a 5.8-inch screen. So my experience with this phone, whenever I got it, is that I was using this cover display a lot. Of course, it looks great. It's a nice OLED display. It's 120 Hertz. It looks phenomenal. And when you open up this display, what you're gonna see is something like the Microsoft Surface Duo 2. Because if you have the Google Pixel Fold, it does have a wider screen, right? So whenever you're using it and you just open it up, you wanna open up one app on the left, one app on the right, it's going to look great because it's almost like two separate screens. Even though it's not, even though it is one screen technically, it's almost like you're separating the screens there, right? So some people are gonna love that, whether it's for reading books. If you go to something like the Kindle app, you could actually separate it out into two columns and separate it based on which screen it's on. So that is amazing for a lot of people. Some people want a wider passport-like display. They really like that. And some people want the taller display. So that is really what this phone, I think, is about. You have to ask yourself if you prefer the display on the inside of this or if you prefer the display on the Z Fold 5. That's really the big question. Do you want a phone that's wider, or do you want a phone that's taller? Now the OnePlus Open, they try to beat you a little bit in the middle. So I get the OnePlus Open is very competitive because they do have a wider cover display, wider than the Z Fold 5, but it is still a little bit taller than the Google Pixel Fold. And that's really what sets OnePlus apart, is they try to meet you in the middle. And that's really, I think, the biggest question. If you're out there looking for a foldable, there are a lot of smaller details out there, and we're gonna get into them, but I think the biggest question you have to ask yourself, what screen size do I want, and what aspect ratio do I want? Do I want it wider? Do I want it taller? What is good for me and what I'm using it for? If you look at weight, this is about 1 ounce heavier, give or take, compared to the Z Fold 5, and that's pretty substantial. Like, it does feel a lot lighter whenever you're holding the Z Fold 5. It feels a little bit better in the hands, and whenever I'm using this, because the cover display is so good, like it is really, really good, because it looks amazing on this basic display, a lot of times you don't even want to open the display. Like, I have used this phone with the cover display for 95% of my day, and I forgot that I even had a foldable phone because this cover display was so good. But with the Z Fold 5, because the cover display is so narrow, I was rarely using the cover display, and I was always opening up the phone. Now, because I was using this outer display so much, I was getting like 10, 11, 12 hours of screen on time. The battery life was insane for me on this Pixel Fold. A lot of people say the battery life is not that good, and maybe that's true if you're always using the inner display. But if you use the outer display, there's been a lot of updates. This is now on Android 14, and the battery life is incredible on this phone. This also has a 4,821 milliamp battery. It's a little bit larger than the Z Fold 4 battery, and that's why you're gonna see nice battery life here. But I get it. A lot of people still say, wait, Zach, the big reason you should not buy the Google Pixel Fold is because of the Tensor G2. People were furious that this phone released with the Tensor G2 processor, and I can understand why. It does have 12 gigs of RAM, now that's really good for multitasking, but the Tensor G2, like, come on, the Tensor is annoying. A lot of people say it overheats, a lot of people have a lot of issues with Tensor, and they say, why can't they just go with Snapdragon? And I do understand some of those concerns, don't get me wrong. If you look at benchmark charts, Absolutely. This processor is much slower than the processor in the Galaxy S23. It's going to be much slower than the processor in the Galaxy S24, and it's going to be much slower than the processor in the Galaxy Z Fold 5. I do get that. But we have to understand that about 95% of the things we do on our phones, they don't require that extra power. So we're not going to notice a big difference. We still have 120 Hz on the display, it's still very, very smooth, and Pixel software has always been buttery smooth. So whenever I'm using this, I don't notice this being slower than my Z Fold 5 in any way, shape, or form. It flies through everything. I'm opening up app after app, I'm able to do my multitasking, I'm able to go between apps, and I'm having no issues at all. Whenever I'm gaming, I'm having no issues there. So really, the only people that are going to notice the speed difference, really the only people that are going to care that this has a Tensor G2, it's really going to be those people who live in warmer places. It's like 3, 4, 5 degrees warmer than a different smartphone if you're really pushing them to their limits. And if you're a gamer who games on the highest settings and you game on really, really intense games, like most games on Android, they are not that intense. A lot of them you could run on a potato and they would run just fine. But when you look at some games, there are a few games out there that really push your phone to the limit. And if you play one of those games, it's not going to be able to game on the highest settings compared to something like the Z Fold 5, at least with a few games out there. Not many, but a few games are going to do a little bit better on the Z Fold 5. But when you buy a foldable phone, you're not buying it typically just to get 5% better performance or to play this game just a little bit better. You're really buying it for that multitasking experience, especially if you're someone who does a lot of office work, you answer a lot of emails, you want to have 2 apps open at the same time. Samsung, by the way, is great with multitasking, don't get me wrong. It's absolutely terrific. But where it breaks down a little bit for Samsung is whenever you're just trying to do 2 things at the same time. The Google Pixel Fold, it's going to work great with doing multitasking and with having 2 apps open at the same time. Samsung, on the other hand, I think you have to flip the phone around to multitask a little bit better, and you might not prefer that. Some people are going to be a little bit different, I understand, with what they prefer, and Samsung does allow you to have 3 apps open at the same time. But with this Google Pixel Fold, you have some limitations, but on the other hand, multitasking, it does great. It also does great with watching content. It's really going to be awesome because you could have it out like this, you could set it on a table, and you're going to have a better viewing experience whenever you're watching YouTube. It's almost like the phone is going to be its own kickstand, for example. If you do the same thing on the Z Fold 5, what you're going to find is the screen is going to look a little bit smaller because the outer display is smaller, it's more narrow, and that does affect your viewing experience whenever you are watching videos. So I have a much better experience when I'm just propping up my phone and watching content on the Pixel Fold. I have a better experience whenever I'm multitasking with 2 apps at the same time on the Pixel Fold. I get you could flip around the Z Fold 5 and have a similar experience, but regardless, I really do enjoy multitasking on this, and I also enjoy video watching on it, and I really do enjoy this cool passport-like device, and I really enjoy the outer display. All of those reasons make the Pixel Fold a terrific phone to get. I also prefer the UI. The UI is great on it. It looks phenomenal. And the display, I get the display is not quite as good as the Z Fold 5. I will say that the Z Fold 5 has better colors on the display. It does look a little more accurate, but the Pixel Fold, it still has a very great and gorgeous looking display with a really good resolution. It is a 7.6 inch screen on the inside, but with the way the aspect ratio works, again, I think it's really phenomenal. It's a 2208 by 1840 resolution, and I'm really impressed. Everything is so smooth with that refresh rate. Now, it doesn't come with a pin. This phone is not made for pin use, but it is water resistant. And if you're into pixels, one thing you'll notice, of course, is the cameras. The cameras are amazing. And even though they're not quite as good as something like the Google Pixel 8 Pro, it's still very close. It is a 48 megapixel camera. Of course, it does record 4K and all that, but the cameras are just really good whenever you're taking pictures of people. In fact, if you look at MKBHD, he recently did a camera test on YouTube, and what he found is almost all of the Google Pixel phones, they were the best phones for him. So I really think the Pixel Fold, whenever I'm using it, I'm getting terrific photos of my family. The shutter lag is very, very minimal. I get more shutter lag on my Z Fold 5. So I think the Pixel Fold actually takes better photos than almost any foldable out there in most situations. Now, the hardware isn't quite as good as something like the OnePlus Open, but despite that, I still prefer the photos from my Google Pixel phone. So what do I make of this Pixel Fold? Is it really the best foldable on the market? Is it really worth buying? Well, I think it is one of the most underrated. I think this phone is criminally underrated for how good it really is. And a lot of people with foldable phones, they love to prop up their phone and watch content on this display. So I love this experience with watching videos. I love the experience with reading. I think it's really, really cool to have two separate screens. I really love the experience for multitasking, and I think this is actually neck and neck with the Z Fold 5 as far as multitasking capabilities. Even though it doesn't have as many features to help that process, it's still very, very good because of the aspect ratio. Now, the cons of it, this is a little bit heavier than some other foldables. I do understand that. And they do have bezels on the inside. Those black bars might be annoying to you, but I did not notice them at all. In fact, I forgot all about them in this video because I wasn't thinking about them, because they're only there so you could have a nice camera on the inside too. So the camera is a little bit nicer than the under display cameras. Even if it doesn't matter to you, who cares about those black bezels? I don't think most people will notice it. If you do care, then maybe this phone isn't for you. But I think this foldable phone is still one of the best options that you can get. It's really for the person who wants a wider foldable phone. If you're someone who's not even in the foldable market, well, yeah, foldable phones, they're a little less durable than a lot of phones out there. You do have an inner screen protector that's protecting a fragile display, and it does sometimes crack down the middle, at least after 2 or 3 years for a lot of people, maybe 4 years. Either way, this phone does have a limited lifespan compared to some other smartphones out there. With every fold, you're slowly decreasing the lifespan. And yes, this phone did retail at like $1,800. That is a lot of money for a foldable phone. Would I recommend it for that price? No, but you're gonna see a lot of sales on it, and we already have. And if you look at places like eBay or Swappa, you're gonna find these in mint condition for around $1,000, maybe even $900, and you might even find a new one for like $1,100 or $1,200. So for that price, I think it's really, really awesome for those people who miss the Surface Duo, people who want a wider aspect ratio on their screen. I don't think most people are gonna notice overheating issues, because in my testing, it barely got warm. I don't think you're gonna have a lot of performance issues. If you're someone who pushes your device to its limit, then maybe, sure. If you're someone who does some crazy intense gaming, sure, the Z Fold 5 is better for you. And if you're someone who thinks this aspect ratio is a little bit too wide, if you want something a little bit more in the middle, something a little more tall, then the OnePlus Open might be for you. And if you're scared of durability, well, you might just want to go with a normal slab phone. But this is still one of the coolest foldable phones that I've really ever used. I think it's amazing. Yes, it's a little bit heavy, and if I'm giving some advice to Google, I would make it a little bit lighter next year. So when I am using this cover display for long periods of time, I don't want my hand to get a little bit fatigued there. So outside of the minor thing with weight, outside of the Tensor G2 being a little bit slower, outside of it getting a little bit warmer than some phones, I think this phone has one of the coolest form factors. I love Google's UI. I love the cameras. It's really one of the best overall foldables out there. And I really think it just depends on who you are, what aspect ratio do you want? Do you want a wider foldable? Do you want a taller one? And what brand of phone you want. Some people prefer Samsung, and some people prefer Google, because Google makes really great cameras and they have a lot of great software features. So let me know what you think in the comments. In the end, it's very underrated and I love it, but let me know what you think. Give me a like to this video if you like it. Also, give me a sub. That does mean a ton to my channel. And if you are interested in purchasing this Google Pixel Fold, please use those links in the description. That is a tremendous way to support my channel. And I plan to cover this and a lot of other phones in the future as well. So have a great day. I really hope you enjoy your week and check out some other content if you get a little bit of time.